it led to some bad fruit. Number one, it caused people to de-emphasize what I'd call personal care, soulish care, moving forward with life, with family, with jobs, with professions. And that sense of urgency that they brought about, that everything had to be a gospel tract in somebody's face, what it did was it drained people personal agency in their life. And then it also caused people to have, I think, an elitist view of theology, that they were right, everybody else was wrong. You're in my box, or you're doing the devil's bidding, or something close to it. And I think that those two things were personally, they're erroneous biblically, but I think they caused great harm, and that harm is still carrying on decades later. So in that particular group, that group happened to be also coincidentally anti-charismatic. So it was not a charismatic group. It was authoritarian, elder-led, where, if you wanted to make a decision about, do I continue in college, you had to kind of go to the elders and ask them to pray for you and find out what the next 6 months of your life would be like. The other problem that it did was it damaged family relationships, because it de-emphasized the sense that you could trust one's own parents as a college kid. And that's not good. So it eroded confidence in parent-child relationships, which if I had a child in that organization today, I would, as a parent, I wouldn't like it. I'd be really upset, because if I'm paying tuition for my kid to go to college, and they're being taken aside by this organization and told, well, you can trust us because we're really the ones following the Bible, and your parents aren't, and your parents aren't living in wisdom, that's not a good thing. So I guess all that to say, in that experience, that was a camp of life. I said I'm on a journey. In that season of life, there was some good, there was some bad, there was admixture in it. There's some good. I had some great relationships. I got my wife out of that. Okay. I got married to a wonderful woman. We're still married, been married 43 years. That was great. But the theological side of it, not so good.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because you mentioned that it wasn't all charismatic. It was more authoritarian. That's the point that I'm trying to detangle and understand in this journey. And it's very difficult to do, because I use the method. You examine the tree by the fruits it bears. And if you see the charismatic fruit that it bore, you assume that it's a charismatic trunk. But there's this one little intersection in time, right after Branham died, when it felt like, at least from the research that I've seen, it feels like there's this weird tug of war between those who are going the charismatic direction, the prosperity gospel, word of faith, and the more authoritarian style, more rigid, fundamentalist. It's like there's this weird collision. And if you fast forward in time, that collision merges. So you have all of this in one big bundle of mess. The NAR is largely authoritarian, but they have also the mixture of the charismatics. But if you go back in time, it wasn't always that way. So I'm trying to piece together what happened and why. And the best that I can tell is it looked like everybody was trying to figure out, out of all of these horses that are running the race, which one is going to make the most money? And so the one that makes the most money wins, right? And then as each movement starts to grow and blossom and start reeling in the bucks, well, they realized that there wasn't a clear winner. So let's all party together and let's create these apostolic networks where we can party with your money and you can party with our money, and the congregants who are joining our conventions can give money to both of us and we can drain them dry. That's what appears to have happened.
I have an embellishment on that, and the embellishment is I blame Oklahoma. I think the money grub came from the oil wells of Oklahoma, and I'm not being derogatory of the state of Oklahoma. I'm a Kansan, so I grew up next door. But you can go down a laundry list of prosperity charlatans that were birthed out of Oklahoma. And the NAR then stole from their playbook prosperity charlatan tactics. But, there are a bunch of, there's Copeland and Hagen and Roberts and Benny Hinn and Creflo Dollar and Paula White and Rod Parsley and, this, and then Daystar. You got this whole laundry list of prosperity charlatans who created a business model, and their business model was how to make money. All right. They were really good at that. And NAR said, okay, well, let's take best practices from the Oklahoma crowd and let's carry it over into Peter Wagner's school of thought, which was much more apostolic prophetic oriented than theirs was. So there's no lack of money grubbing out there amongst Pentecostals, charismatics, NAR. It's a common denominator of them. But I will say this, I will disavow this. The group I was part of, there was no money. None of us had any money. We were all broke. Everybody was poor. Everybody was young and poor. So, our group was not motivated by money. We were motivated by get the gospel out.
Yeah, that's funny. In the Branham cults, there weren't too many people who had a lot of money. See, interestingly, as these things go over time, the leadership drains the common folk dry, the rank and file members, and then the rank and file members get into leadership. So there's this weird cycle, right, where now the leadership are poor and they need money, so they try to attract new members, and this cycle just goes and goes. But at the root of all of it, there seems to be money.
But it's Amway. It's Amway is what it is. It's 99% of the money goes up the pyramid to the top two levels, the executive level and executive lieutenant level. Anybody below that level, no, you're paying into the system. If you're at the executive tier, and it doesn't have to be a single individual, the executive tier could be a plurality of people, and then one notch below them, in German, they would call it an Oberstleutnant. It's the one level below the general. And so that level also, lieutenant colonel level, you can also make some money. But in general, it's the top dogs that are really good with the sweaty handkerchief and the microphone prophets that get on TV. And then they're given false prophecies about, if only, 100, the Lord told me that 100 of you listening tonight will each write a check for $5,000. And by the way, God takes credit cards. I've written a chapter on this in one of my books called Half-Truths or Lies. The opening chapter is called Right on the Money. Right on the Money. And the whole thing is about prosperity charlatanism, which has run amok in Pentecostalism and the charismatic movement, and also in the elite levels of NAR. And I'm familiar with leaders of the NAR. I'm acquaintances of those folks. So
yeah, the root of all of this mess, I think, is money. See, whenever Branham did what he did and brought the popularity of he was bringing in some of the spiritualist themes, the things that was more entertaining, he brought that to the gospel and then brought this to a huge platform of entertainment. And he's working directly with members of the Kardashian family. That's the funny part about all of this. So he creates this entertainment gospel. Everybody joins into it. And it is a money train that he has created. Mm-hmm. And all of these, everybody wants to join into the train. We want our money too. Now, I will put a caveat to that. There were some people who joined in the revivals who legitimately were not after money. Their hearts were in the right place. They wanted to save souls, and they saw this as a new gospel. Although they were somewhat manipulated to think that this was the original gospel, not a new gospel, but they saw it as different from what the denominations had. And it was being presented to the wide audience as though the denominations had grown cold and formal. Ours is new, just like it was in the days of Jesus. So join us. It's a new gospel. But then once they get in it and they get in on the train, it's really hard to get back off. And it's what do you do with that, right? You're in this system that is generating all kinds of revenue. And I think that there were many ministers who wanted out after they realized what it was. But how do you do this? How do you leave clean? Because when you do, the way that the authoritarian control worked, it trained the people that when you left this, you were actually leaving God. So
Yep.
if a minister left, his whole congregation is gone. His whole income, he loses everything that
Yep.
he had. I've talked to Branhamite ministers who've left, and that's exactly the problem. As soon as they left, one guy said his congregation went down to like 5 people, I think, 5 or 10 people. And so he's filling the church every Sunday, and he says, I'm going to stand up for the gospel. I'm not going to preach Branhamism. If you want to go home and read that, whatever, that's fine. But in this church, I'm preaching only from the Bible. Most of his people left.